Hey, true believers, Englentine here. I saw a couple of articles at Bleeding Cool. 5 things DC did wrong and 5 things Marvel did wrong. Obviously, this is going to be the DC one. Now, I would advise not to go to Bleeding Cool just because they can shut your crap down. They have so many advertisements now. Chef Jack even has a more powerful computer than I do, and his has trouble whenever he leaves Bleeding Cool open long enough to read an article. Anyway, let's get on with what this one says and what they believe the top 5 biggest mistakes DC Comics has made in 2017. Publishing Doomsday Clock. Okay, right off the bat. It remains the ultimate raised middle finger to comic creators. Something that says, yes, you know that deal you and DC Comics have made, the one where we promoted as creator-owned deal? Well, when circumstances change in a way no one can foresee, rather than succumb and renegotiate the deal like Warner's did with the Writers Guild when the DVDs came along, we'll just employ more lawyers than you and do our level best to destroy any dignity of your work and make your characters fight the Smurfs. Did he read a different Doomsday Clock than I did? I don't remember the Smurfs. There are many other supposedly creator-owned series still controlled by DC Comics, and when a creator asks about getting the rights back, DC will rush through a fat comic reprint on standard paper of the run to make sure they keep controlling it, just in case you wonder why DC Comics still does that sometimes. Set aside for the moment that Doomsday Clock hasn't exactly wowed me, this isn't a problem. For one thing, DC is just getting cash hand over fist thanks to producing this, and the perceived slight that Bleeding Cool is feeling for Alan Moore. Let's face it, Alan Moore hates DC no matter what they do, and anytime they even mention the word Watchmen, Alan Moore's eyes roll like a freaking slot machine. So right now, we're not seeing or feeling any kind of effects that this might have with other creator-owned projects, as they put it. So as far as being top 5 mistakes DC has made, sorry, this one shouldn't even make the list. Number 4, the new age of DC heroes, the diversity, the delays, and the lies. In the wake of the success of Jeff Johns' Rebirth relaunch, Dan Didio and Jim Lee dedicated all their resources to everything but. Dan Didio launched a brand new, exciting future of the DC Universe with a bunch of new characters and new books, all written and drawn by men. Fuck those men. In doing so, he also created massive friction within the publisher by giving those chosen few far more attractive terms for their work than other DC creators got. This pulled them away from editorial groups who were relying on them for their own titles, pinning plenty of company resources on the new promotion, only to then cancel it all and reschedule it for 2018, stating that the reason was that retailers would be able to see how the books span out of the... Span? Is he trying to say spun? Span is not... Okay, anyway. Out of the metal event, which DC also dodged a bullet on by Snyder and Capullo, stopping them from calling Dark Crisis. Okay, rather than just being really, really late, I mean, Jim Lee's book, The Immortal Men, was delayed a further 6 months. They were meant to move the needle. Instead, they pushed comics revenue out of 17 and into 18, which may have led to... I guess that's going to be next, but first let's comment on what he's saying here. I'm really waiting for Bleeding Cool to tell me something that DC made as a mistake, and I'm sure they've made mistakes. Granted, the first one, perceived slight, that could be seen as maybe from some people. But it definitely doesn't affect us. This one isn't even a mistake. It's a business decision. They're going to push back this whole launch of a whole bunch of books to be after their huge year-end event. That just sounds like smart business. To me, anyway. So maybe it takes money out of 2017, but it just means that 2018 is going to be that much sweeter. The fact that Dan Didio and Jim Lee seem to focus on this rather than the relaunch of Rebirth, Hello, guys, well handled. I didn't hear a lot of people going, well, gosh darn that Rebirth. Maybe he's getting it mixed up with Legacy. Not beating Marvel in comic sales. Well, now, okay, before I even read this, I gotta say, I do a list based on your list, Bleeding Cool. And every week, DC is kicking the crap out of Marvel. Now, you may be talking about Marvel sales to shops, where shops are being stuck with tons of overstock. Maybe there. Okay, sure. Maybe. Not really. But the fact that they put out a whole ton more books. Okay, anyway, let's read it. Not beating Marvel Comics in sales, because despite everything on Jude's Marvel list, this was written by that Jude dude, the House of Ideas still sold more comics and made more money than DC Comics across the board. This may not have been true for all stores and in all markets, but in the vast majority, Marvel still came out on top. So despite all of Marvel's PR problems, and with DC Comics seemingly on the revival with Metal Rebirth and Doomsday Clock, the three things that they had just insulted here in Rebirth, in this freaking article, getting books like Flash, Teen Titans, and Superman to sell well again, Burbank couldn't beat Manhattan. As I said before, the sales to the shops are different than the sales to customers. Marvel doesn't even own until about the top 40. Once it gets past 40, that's when Marvel really, starts to take over. DC owns the rest. They own the beginning. Now, granted, every time I've counted down, Marvel has 8 versus the 12 that DC usually has in the top 20. But that doesn't change it. Also, I would have to point out that this is something that may be seen along Bleeding Cool's favor, is the fact that usually it's Batman at the top. Batman just takes over the top 10 for DC, and occasionally, like a Superman will jump in, or Super Sons. But more and more DC titles are making a strong showing in the sales to readers. And this is something that I think Marvel Comics will have to contend with at some point in time. But DC is definitely on the move. And I agree that as comic readers, we should pay attention to titles like the Flash, Teen Titans, and such, because those are good titles, and a lot better than a lot of the stuff that Marvel is producing. Not publishing a Wonder Woman comic book that capitalized off the success of the movie. When the first X-Men movie came out, it didn't do much for then editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics Bob Harras, as the X-Men comic book published in Entertainment Weekly alongside promotion for the movie was as inaccessible as all of the X-Men books at the time. That one publishing decision led to the rise of Bill Jemas and Joe Quesada. So there you go. Bleeding Cool is blaming Bob Harras for one more day, and created the Marvel we have now. Well, the Wonder Woman movie did very well this year, but neither the Earth 1 graphic novel nor the Wonder Woman comics had an appropriate tone or attitude that might have appealed to the audiences of the movie. Instead, courtesy of current DC Comics editor-in-chief Bob Harras, we got a Wonder Woman ongoing comic by James Robinson about Wonder Woman's brother. And sales of the comics in the wake of the movie fell, and in 2016, DC had already canceled the 2 books that could have had a chance of benefiting from the movie. Sensation Comics and Legends of Wonder Woman. It made it in after all. Also, while we're talking movies, there was a Justice League movie flop, the performance of which also saw a rift emerge between DC presidents Diane Nelson and Jeff Johns. There is a lot to unpack here. Now, let's first start with the glaring, I can't even call it an omission, it's a flat-out lie. After the movie of Wonder Woman, we got the James Robinson story about her brother. I don't know if that's how he talks. I know he's British, but I do believe he has that accent. Okay, dude. After the Wonder Woman movie, there was a really shitty run by Shea Fontana, and that is what drove the books down in sales. It was a really bad run. When James Robinson came in, it started picking up again. The brother storyline has been a success, especially with the inclusion of Darkseid. Now, so far, you can call a lot of what they say the problems are just opinion, or maybe if you squint real hard, you can see it, but that was a flat-out lie. That was a big-ass lie of omission, and I cannot respect that. If you're going to debate, debate the truth, debate the facts. Don't make up the straw man. That is just wrong. The other thing brought up that I think could be commented on is the fact that the movie didn't bump up sales of the comic, but we've been seeing a trend now that movies do not bump. I don't think it's like it used to be. We're getting superhero movies 2, 3, 4 a year. It's a lot different now. People can get their superheroing at the big screen. So one does not necessarily lead to the other. And this has even been proven with the Star Wars books, which there was no bump up for that #1 based on the movie. Then it just hasn't been that way with any. Guardians of the Galaxy didn't bump up Guardians of the Galaxy. Yet we're bringing it out for Wonder Woman. At this point, it sounds like you're looking for something to fill out an article with. And the #1 problem that Bleeding Cool thinks that DC Comics has is that they waited until BuzzFeed put out an article to deal with Berganza. Pretty much every comic book and media culture website, including Bleeding Cool, had reported at some time about allegations of sexual harassment against Superman Group editor Eddie Berganza over fellow staffers. DC Comics told everyone the matter had been dealt with. Berganza had been demoted and lost significant salary in the process, but it continued to taint decisions. Creators refused to work under Berganza. When women staff members were dropped, the overwhelming response was asking why they had been fired and not Berganza. And he was unable to host any DC Comics events, promotions, or appear on panels for fear of the public response. But it took BuzzFeed to run an article quoting many women ex-employees of DC that saw DC Comics forced to drop Berganza earlier this year, and spinning that this was all down to the toxic nature of the New York culture, which was not replicated at Burbank. As long as no one remembers the art director at San Diego Comic-Con the previous year. This is a touchy subject. Now, on one hand, I'm very much a fan of if somebody is accused, then they don't fire him right away because they have to make sure that he's actually doing something. But when multiple accusers come in, you definitely have to take note. Now, you can't say that DC didn't do anything and then list off a whole bunch of things that DC did. And that's what Bleeding Cool has done in this article. DC didn't react, except for they demoted him. They wouldn't let him at any public benefits, yada, yada, so on, so on. But what Bleeding Cool means is they didn't fire him right away. Okay, well, maybe that wasn't DC's policy at the time. And I understand the way everybody on the other side's going to take this is Englentine saying sexual harassment's all right. Englentine ain't saying shit about that. But what I'm saying is, whether you like it or not, whether you like their company policies or not, DC did do something about it, and that's what this article's pointing out. Whether you think they went far enough or not, then that is what you should make the article about, which I'm sure somewhere along the lines you have. But that's not what was stated here. But was it the #1 mistake DC's made this year? No, not at all. Power Girl. The original Power Girl is still not in Rebirth. That is the #1 mistake of every year she is out of Rebirth. But that's just my opinion. What is yours? What do you think is DC's #1 mistake for 2017? And what do you think of the mistakes that Bleeding Cool says DC has made? Do you think they're mistakes? Do not. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, Wonder Woman did have a comic book come right after a movie. It was a Steve Trevor one-shot, and it sucked. Did a whole ripping review on that. Look it up. It's funny stuff. Yeah, I remember it got demonetized for me talking about the dick monster that attacked Wonder Woman. Got you interested now, don't you? Go check out my Steve Trevor review. You'll dig it. Alrighty. Once again, what did you think? Put it in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, you want to see more, you know the drill. Click like, share, subscribe to see more. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, even if you're subscribed, because for some reasons, YouTube's turned off notifications. Also, this is the way we make our living, so if you don't mind, head on over to Patreon. Drop $1 in the till. Helps keep the lights on and helps keep making videos like this for you. I'd like to thank everybody who's already done that. And everyone, to all of the true believers who believe that she's a wonder, that Wonder Woman. Thank you very, very much for watching.